Bloomberg now claims a 100% chance of a recession in 2023. Here's what you should do before that. My response to talk of a recession is that when times get tough, politicians and governments get squirrely. And so that's when I want to have my international backup plan ready. If you look throughout any time of chaos, the government responds with a heavy hand. They do stupid stuff economically. They do stupid stuff to restrict your freedoms. That is the standard in the Western world. And so when I'm reading that times get tough, I feel more protected being diversified with different citizenships, different residence permits, different places that I can go and live to protect myself, to reduce my taxes, to increase my investments. I have that infrastructure set up. And if it's your first time here, I'm Andrew Henderson, founder of Nomad Capitalist. We help 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally reduce your taxes, protect your assets, increase your freedom, and grow your opportunities. And so if I look at my lifetime, look at the pandemic, what happened? People couldn't go to their jobs, or the government wouldn't let them go to their jobs. There was a lot of chaos, and so we sent people in the Western world large checks, which distorted the economy. It's created a lot of behavior now, where you have in your business, you can't hire people because the mindset that was created during the pandemic changed. But what the government did, what the banks did, was they printed a whole bunch of money to do that. More money than it cost to win World War II, to send money to people in the United States, for example, to get through a pandemic. And so now what's the government doing? Now we've got to have shared sacrifice, which means you, the successful person, need to pay more. They want to impose new taxes. We've talked for 2 years now about more talk of wealth taxes in countries around the world, particularly in Western countries, because we have to pay for this thing. Well, the government created it. And now they want to blame you for the problem. So that's what happens during a time of chaos. If you look back at the global financial crisis, what happened? A lot of blaming of business. The Occupy Wall Street movement was born. The phrase the 1% came into the public lexicon. And my thought is, in the Western world, and really anywhere in general in this case, people don't know the difference between the person who's running a business making $500,000, that maybe drives a nice car, has some employees, and has some problems, and a very, very successful multimillionaire business person. I mean, obviously, if you see Jeff Bezos flying in a private jet, you figure the guy who lives to you next door in Kenosha, Wisconsin, running the business, doesn't have a private jet. But I think people don't have a concept of money in general to where, hey, the guy's a nice car, he's probably a billionaire or something. It's a little bit extreme, but I think it's not that far off, actually. I mean, if you look at how people judge wealth, it's by cars, it's by clothing, it's by things like that. And so you could be one of the people who lives in the United States or any other high-tax country who is having a nice life, but you're not really saving a lot of money because you make $500,000 or $1 million a year, and you spend it on all the things you're supposed to be spending it on, the nice clothes and all the things that you're, keeping up with the Joneses you're supposed to do. You don't have that much extra money. You don't have that much extra slack in your business. If your margins get cut, you're going to be screwed. And so you're not Elon Musk, but people don't know the difference. And so politicians play into that in times of crisis when people are scared, and they stop thinking logically about, well, should we really go after the guy who makes the $1 million business, who's already not keeping that much of his money, who employs a bunch of us and maybe needs some help? Now, I'm not saying we should be giving out, PPP loans and just handing people money. That was done terribly, and that's part of the problem in the United States, for example, is tons of money was just given out fraudulently and stupidly. So the point, though, is during times of toughness, look at a recession. You're going to blame business, you're going to blame successful people, and people aren't often going to know what it is that really looks successful. They've taken the fact that 55 major companies don't pay taxes in the US to expand that to all big business doesn't pay taxes. And that's in good times. That's when people are happy. That's when people's home prices are going up. That's when people are spending money on all kinds of discretionary stuff. That's when people were sitting at home, watching Tiger King on Netflix. During the good times, the narrative was all these greedy big businesses that don't pay taxes. And yet I look at companies to invest in, including occasionally some companies in the United States, and I see the average tax rate. A lot of these companies are paying big taxes. So the fact that a handful of people are not paying taxes has turned into playing into the politicians' hands of nobody rich pays taxes. Right? I mean, you see Warren Buffett going out. I'm a big Warren Buffett fan, but Warren Buffett goes out and says he pays a lower tax rate than his cleaning lady because he adds the payroll tax in, not realizing that he's not going to get more money in Social Security just because he didn't pay more in payroll taxes. Not realizing that he still pays a boatload more taxes in real terms than the cleaning lady. And so people hear that and they just kind of assume, well, everybody who's successful must be Warren Buffett, and they're screwing the system. Yeah, Warren Buffett's, whatever it was, 15% last year in taxes is a lot more than someone else's 15% in taxes. And if the goal is, paying for roads and bridges, isn't his 15% enough? But all these things are what's going to create when there's a recession. This is, again, already the narrative in good times. What happens when the narrative is we're screwed and we're in a recession? People have, in many cases, avoided saying that you have 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth. Somehow that's not a recession, but perhaps that's recession light. And so my suggestion is, if you're watching this and you are a citizen of one country, especially if that country is the United States, you need to have some kind of protection ready so that you've got a place to go. I was reading about the billionaire Peter Thiel recently, who has his passport portfolio. He's a citizen of the US and presumably of Germany, and we know of New Zealand, and now looking at getting citizenship in Malta. Why? Because he wants to keep his options open. And so you can set aside some percentage of your income or some percentage of your net worth or some combination of both to get an insurance policy that perhaps also increases your life and your lifestyle. So if you are an American, for example, you could get citizenship in Malta now that the euro has reached parity or less with the dollar. And you can pay 750,000 euros plus 50,000 euros per dependent plus some fees. And in the matter of 15 to 18 months, get citizenship for you and your entire family in a European Union country that, unlike the United States, doesn't tax you if you don't live there. That, unlike the United States, gives you the ability to live in about 30 different countries all throughout Europe, some of which have tax incentives, some of which have more freedoms than others, all of which have something unique. You're expanding your optionality, that you have about 30 different countries you could go and live in. And if the US ever decided to really stick it to you, you could just hand them their passport back. And certainly, even if you didn't want to hand your passport back, you could go and live in those other places, whether that increased your financial security, your personal safety, whether it increased your lifestyle options. That's something that you can do, and you can make that contribution to Malta. You can get golden visas all throughout Europe where you make investments that don't give you citizenship, but give you residence and the ability to live there. And in some cases, like in Portugal, allow you to work towards citizenship. Those are just examples in Europe, for example. But when I see billionaires, we saw Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google, doing the same. We see many other celebrities and high net worth individuals doing the same and getting citizenships. Because what does that do for them? What happens is when the people in their country decide to turn on them and the politicians decide to enact crazy tax laws, like if the United States imposes a wealth tax, you might say, you know what, this is not worth sticking around for. And so you're going to want to go somewhere else. Citizenship is the ultimate protection. If I could only get one, I would get citizenship. If I could get one citizenship and then get another residence of a place I wanted to live, i.e., I'm going to get Malta citizenship with the optionality of being able to live anywhere in Europe. And again, many of those European countries now have tax incentives if you were to go and live there full time. They don't all have high taxes for foreigners. I might say, you know what, I want to have residence next door in Mexico. Or I want residence in Singapore. If I'm really going to commit to a country and I've got money, I can live there. Or I'm going to do the cheaper version of that. I'm going to move to Malaysia, for example. I'm going to have residence in Malaysia. And so you can get residence permits in countries that don't require you to live there to keep the residence. You can get citizenships in countries that don't require you to move there to get citizenship. In the Caribbean in 6 months, in Malta in 15 to 18 months. In other countries, if you have a big business, you could do that. If you have descent, someone in your family tree, you can go back 2, 3, even 4, sometimes generations and claim that. So find a way to get citizenship first and then add on residences. And the benefit of this, again, is if you move out of your country, it's harder for Americans, but it's still doable. You can move out of your country and basically get out of the tax system. So if you're an American, you're not going to exit the tax system, but you'll get plenty of exclusions and exemptions, and you can use foreign corporations, and you can do different things to legally reduce your taxes. Everybody else in the world, you just leave your tax system, cut your ties with your country, and you're out. In recessions, your politicians might say, let's raise taxes. Look at what the minimum wage in the United States has gone from. $15 minimum wage? Oh, that's so 2021. Now it's $25 minimum wage. When's it $1,000 minimum wage? And you look at a country like Singapore, where there's essentially no minimum wage, and look at the environment that's created. And yet things work a lot better. The country's a lot safer. It's a lot more harmonic. No place is perfect, but certainly a lot more harmonized than the United States is these days. So why aren't we borrowing from the Singapore model? Why aren't we making things work better? That's not what politicians in the Western countries want to do. They just want to make sure that they maintain their power, something that many Asian countries don't need to do. But these Western democracies, they want to maintain their power. That's going to be coming out against you. It's going to mean that what you saw in 2020, when there were riots in the streets of wealthy neighborhoods and people were being targeted, that's perhaps going to be allowed, because who's going to want to speak up against the evil 1% or for the 1%? That's certainly going to mean raising your taxes, imposing new taxes, and imposing retroactive taxes. When I was on Fox Business in late 2020, what's going to happen? What should you do before 2021 when Joe Biden gets in? The idea was, hey, even if he gets in late January and passes a law in June, they can make that go retroactive to the beginning of 2021. So you want to get your affairs in order now. And in the same way, if a recession is coming, you want to make sure that you have places you can go. Citizenship comes first, residence comes second. Do them both together if you can afford it, and make sure that you're not a sitting duck. Countries are making their tourist visa policies more difficult. You can no longer just go to Mexico and not be asked any questions and spend 6 months there and then leave for a day and then come back. They don't want that anymore. So you want to get residence permits and you want to get citizenships that allow you to, number one, if you really had to, take the ultimate step and tell your country to take a hike. If you just want to be able to go somewhere else and change your tax status and increase your freedom, then again, something in Europe gives you 30 different options or so. If you've got a citizenship in the Caribbean, you can move freely between 6 different countries and a little bit less freely between a larger group of countries called the Caribbean Community. So those are 2 places to start where you're building optionality besides just getting one country. But on the other side, if you also have a British parent, you can get UK citizenship. That allows you to live in the UK and Ireland. If you have an Armenian ancestor, get that passport. I mean, get whatever that you can get. And then if you are wealthy, if you are successful, figure out how to employ residence and citizenship as a vessel to be able to relocate to lower your taxes. And that's what I would do before people get really squirrely and the politicians come out with their guns ablazing.